Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong live stream and podcast. I'm your host, Rich Natoli, and I'm joined this week by the lovely and talented co-host, Ed Gobo, owner of Captain Hank's Tackle. Ed, how you doing?
Good, man. Happy to be back. It's nice having a week off, but glad to get back into it.
Yeah, you had the week off while the coaches jumped on last week, and we went through a lot of different topics. This week is a really, really interesting one for the Mid-Atlantic. And, we're talking all the way down to Virginia. But anyone who has blackfish, tautog, tog, white chinners, whatever you want to call them, we've been running into the issue the past few weeks with just terrible wind. And a lot of boats can't make it offshore. So what are you going to do? Well, what you're going to do is what we do. We turn to our buddy Bayside Dave, who we're going to bring onto the stream right now. And you go and you attack this fishery from the shore like Dave has done for quite a while, and you get on the fish that way. Dave, welcome to the stream. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How you guys doing?
Good. I'm doing great. Doing great. Want to let everybody know, those that have watched this stream when it was on the previous channel, the Fat Dad Fishing channel, they're familiar with Bayside Dave. If you fish in New Jersey, especially in Long Beach Island, you are familiar with Bayside Dave. Dave is the owner of the Fishing LBI group on Facebook, and it's all fishing reports, and it's only about Long Beach Island. And he's the admin of that group. And one of the coolest things about that group is it's very heavily curated, which means you don't have people in there throwing bogus information. There aren't fights. There aren't, the normal Facebook drama things. It is a pure fishing page. And Dave, you've done a great job with that. And
thank you so much.
And as a result of that, you have a lot of people that follow you and a lot of people that look to you for help.
Yeah, it's opened up. I opened up as a forum for other anglers to share their information with each other in an effort to just, be helpful and give the information to people to help them have a more successful day out there, and also to understand, there's a lot of people out there who only fish here and there. Maybe every couple of weeks they want to make it down to LBI and do some fishing, and just seeing and knowing that they can go on my page and only get the information about the surf fishing reports that are happening down on LBI. They know they can get that there. The other good thing about my group is, even though it is focused on LBI fishing reports, there's all general surf fishing information. No matter where you fish, you're still in the surf, and there's still all that information that pertains to the surf fishing that you're doing, no matter where you are and where you're at. So even though you might not be fishing LBI, you can still get a lot of information from my group just about surf fishing in general.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of good information in there, and there's a lot of members in there that just really know a ton, and they're all open to sharing and helping people. You don't go in there and ask a question and everybody jumps on you for asking a question. You get some genuinely helpful people, and I've seen a lot of information, multiple species. I've seen people asking about fluke from the surf, which we need to talk about that with you next summer, because that's something that you do. Mm-hmm. So fluke or flounder from the beach. I've seen a lot of bluefish, striped bass, the tog from the jetties, especially. LBI has some nice rock structures, fish, which we're going to talk about.
It's been a killer year for tog this year. It's been off the charts.
It has, and it's kicking off all the way up and down the coast. So, the people down in Maryland, I've been seeing some beautiful pictures right now. All the way up in Rhode Island, I've seen some 20-plus pounders, 16-plus pounders released, 14-pounders in New Jersey, 12.
That's amazing.
All up and down the coast. And we've got people right now in the chat from all over the place. You got James Flynn, Crabbing and Fishing, Participation Trophy in New Jersey. Got from Maryland, MJ Fishnut, Tom Weber in New Jersey, John Kern, New Jersey. We've got a bunch of people. Jack West is jumping in, KB 771. So we've got people all up and down the coast. I'd like to know, though, and this is going to be my first question for you. I want to know from the people that are out there in the chat or watching live, or even if they're watching the replay in the comments, what do you call them? Are you calling them tautog, tog, white chinners, blackfish? What are you calling them?
Me?
Yeah.
Me, I just say I go tog fishing, or I just use the term blackfish a lot.
All right.
But I mostly use just the term tog. I'm going for tog. I don't use tautog. Just short and sweet tog.
Yeah, I've switched. Ed, what about you? What are you using?
I call them tog, and then if I'm going fishing for them, I say I'm going togging.
Okay.
Togging, yeah.
I've started doing that because I used to say blackfish, and then blackfish is different all over the place. So, some guys I know on the West Coast are like, you don't have blackfish there. I was like, we do. And I showed them a picture like that's not a blackfish. and then it was the same thing with sheep's head. A sheep's head on the Western coast off of California is much different than what we have here.
Say the California sheep's head look more like blackfish than blackfish.
Yeah, they look.
Yeah, and down south they call it stripers rockfish.
Yeah. They had the month of October in Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So, all right. So let's get started for those that now listen. If you're not fishing for blackfish or tog right now, and you're in an area that has a population of them, man, I'm going to tell you right now, you should give it a try, especially on those windy days where you can't get offshore, you can't run after the striped bass or the speckled trout or the reds in the backwaters. If you just want to change it up, listen to Dave in this episode, because he's going to get you dialed in on the equipment, on the baits, on the techniques. You're probably, even knowing you, Dave, you're going to show how to tie something.
I'll show some rigs. I won't exactly show you.
Well, that's what I mean. You'll show the rigs so that you'll get everything that you need to know. But it's just a great fighting fish, and it tastes absolutely delicious. It's actually my wife's new favorite after the last one that she had. She's like, that's it. This is all I want.
Definitely one of my favorite fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, to eat.
So let's talk about. Let's start off with the most basic of things. So let's say we're going to talk just about land-based fishing for tog today.
Right.
What types of structures or areas are you going to be looking for when you wake up in the morning, you're in a new place, and you're like, I want to go catch some tog? What are you going to be looking for when you hit the water?
You got to find them rock jetties, man. They are found by bridges, abutments, and they are found by sodbank areas also, in deep pockets, anywhere where there are mussels, any kind of crustaceans, crabs, even clams that they'll grab. But for the most part, their main dish is the mussels. Wherever mussels are growing, that's where they're at. Here on LBI, we have a beautiful jetty going up out of Barnegat Inlet. It's got to be a mile long from the lighthouse all the way out to the tip, and every square inch of that jetty has been filled with tog all season. I mean, we got people off the walkway, not even climbing down over to the rocks, because there's a strip of rocks on the other, just along the walkway there. You don't even have to climb down to it. Just cast out, drop straight down. They're catching tog all along that. We got guys crawling out to the very end, to the tip, around the tower, dropping in those deep waters out there, picking up tog. And all along that whole stretch there, whether you're casting out or whether you're dropping down between rocks, because there's some big pockets that get formed between the rocks. It looks like a little small opening, maybe the size of a couple shoe boxes wide, and you'll drop down. All of a sudden, you'll be like, wow, that's 12 feet. And we had it. Many times you can go in those holes like that and drop straight down and just stay there for like an hour or two and pull up fish constantly, because those big pockets, they actually open up into the inlet. So it's not just a trapped pocket of water that you only can catch a few fish and clean it out. I mean, it's, you could, like I said, I was there a couple times. There's a couple spots that I go to, and the one hole I pulled 30 fish out of, and so there's many different.
It's a good day.
Fish for them, whether you're dropping straight down, whether you're casting out, and we could talk more about that. But it's just those rock jetties are the key place to target for sure if you want to go for tog.
I'm going to agree. A rock jetty is going to be my first place, or a rock pie. It doesn't have to be a full jetty. a mile long, but the rocks are definitely going to be where
or anywhere where there's rocks below the water. You have the Point Pleasant Canal is full of rocks. Guys go right over the fences there, pulling up Tautog. Around the corner from the lighthouse, going into the bay area where the gas docks are and all that stuff, there's a good strip of seawall right there, and that's 35 feet of water, and the bottom is just covered with big boulders, and guys are all along that whole strip there catching Tautog all the time. It's beautiful. Yeah,
absolutely. Ed, where else would you be looking if you're going from shore?
I mean, that's actually how I cut my teeth catching Tautog. Mostly rock walls, jetties, stuff like that. Down here, there's a couple, even fishing piers. We have multiple fishing piers. We can, depending on the direction of the current, we can drop down behind the pilings, and they'll be hanging out there too.
Yeah, I think the important thing is docks and piers also work. I think the jetties are probably the best. Now, the bridges, I think, are right up there, very close, but they're much more difficult to fish. It depends on where you are. In New Jersey, if you're fishing from a bridge, you're most likely illegally fishing from a bridge with cars coming right behind you a couple feet. Yeah. There are some fishing bridges, but for the most part, you have to be really careful. The sod banks definitely work, but I really like the old docks, and it has to be. That's a good comment from Fishing Adventures. What are you guys talking about?
Dad joke.
Old wood with a lot of growth is what you definitely want to be fishing, because the more, as you said, the more mussels and crustaceans that are living on there, the better for the bite. Now let's talk specifically about the jetty, because I think that's the rock piles and the jetties are probably in New Jersey and in Delaware and in Maryland. If you're fishing from shore, those are probably going to be the most popular. There are some places in New York, certainly you would still fish them in New York, but you can reach a lot of boulder fields from land in certain areas on Long Island. But what do you, when you get out onto those rocks, how are you knowing where to place the bait? Are you going straight down, or are you casting out? What are you really looking for once you get out there?
Well, I'm looking for deep water. I'm looking for areas where fish kind of like to get by a larger area of boulders and kind of hang out, because they feel like they're protected from some of the currents, and the water isn't moving as quickly when you're protected by a rock. And I think those areas, I think the mussels will stay in those areas a lot more and give them fish more to feed on. And so it all depends on the tide, of course. If you have a lower tide and there's not a lot of water right by the rocks where you're standing, you're not going to drop straight down, because you might only have a couple feet of water there, and those fish are going to feel exposed in a couple feet of water. So you're kind of looking for those deeper pockets. Even when it is low tide, when the amount of rocks and structure that we have on that Barnegat Inlet, you might be into some shallow waters right there by your feet, right by the rocks. But you just kind of toss out and just watch your line drop down. And sometimes all of a sudden, wow, there's a nice deep pocket right there. So that's what I'm looking for, is deep pockets if I'm fishing close to the rocks. On the higher tides, and I'm not saying it's the correct thing to do, because you can fish tight to the rocks, high or low tide. Fish are everywhere. I tend to go, when I go towards the middle or the end of the jetty, the Barnegat Inlet jetty, the rocks not only drop straight down, but they actually go out about 10 or 20 yards. And as the water gets deeper, where it's 25, 30 feet of water, a lot of the big fish are scooching around on the edge of those rocks where it meets the inlet. So you're out about 10, 15 yards with your cast. And a lot of times, and you're going to catch those big fish because they're scooching around those outer areas. I've also been lucky enough to have some really good friends, or met some guys who I've become very friendly with, who are down there skin diving, scuba diving, or not skin diving,
snorkeling and spear fishing.
Spear fishing, thank you.
Yep.
And I mean, they tell me everything. I have two guys in particular that they like private message me all the time. I was down there today in this section, this area. We saw 10, 15 pounders scooching around, and there's no way for you guys to get to them. But if you this, if you that. So they're telling me, what's going on out there. And for the good few years that I've been fishing off that jetty, I've always found that when I cast out 10 or even 20 yards, I do very well catching the bigger fish. So it's about finding deep water and like pockets where the boulders kind of surround and make like a little area that the fish like to scooch into and kind of hang out and feed.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for.
I agree. I have said many times, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. If you're going to be on a rock jetty or a finger jetty or something like that, a lot of people think that because you're standing on it, let's say it's one of the ones made for fishing, so it's kind of leveled out on top, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you see it go out to the sides by a few feet, maybe 5 feet, and then it disappears into the water. And I think a lot of people think then it just drops straight up and down, like it's some vertical wall there. Well, it's not. It's going to go all the way out to the side, down to the bottom, and then often it'll have a drop off, especially if you're fishing an inlet. So like Barnegat Inlet, there are areas along that jetty that'll drop really quickly. Hereford Inlet, you can be fishing on the bottom if you drop straight down on these rocks in 8 feet of water. Toss it out 5 yards, now you're in 15 feet of water. You toss it out 15 yards, you're in 50 feet of water right there, and there are boulders down there. The boulders that they put in there that kind of slid down into the inlet are down there. So, but you have to find those pockets, and I think that's one of the more challenging things because you're usually talking a lot of current. And when you're throwing out there and you get into that 50 feet of water, you now have 50 feet of water current on your 10, 15, 20 pound braid, pushing your jig or your rig directly into those rocks. And then that doesn't make for a fun time.
Yeah. I've learned a lot about the current that runs in the Barnegat Inlet. And, a lot of guys who fish out there know it as well, that, there are certain times to go out there when that current is slowing down, because it runs in and then it goes slack and then it runs back out, all according to the tide times. And we found that the Barnegat Inlet, when you have the tide time, whether it's high or low on the beach, that the water, the current running in, all right, so it's low tide out on the beach at 9 o'clock. So out on the beach, 9 o'clock is low tide. It's going to slacken. It's going to start going out. But you still have the outgoing current, even though now you have tide coming in. The outgoing current is still going to run for about 2 hours, but it's slowing down. And then about 2 hours after the tide time, it gets slack in the inlet for a few minutes, sometimes 10, 20 minutes. And then it starts running in slow and starts speeding up. And the 2 hour window, before, as, there's the tide time out on the beach, you have that 2 hour window before it stops, slacks, and turns the other way. 2 hours after that, it starts running the other way. That's when the current really starts to speed up. And then you got to start putting your 6 ounces and your 8 ounces on. So I always get out there at the tide time, knowing now I got 2 hours of slow down, slack, and 2 hours of turn the other way and speed up. That's 4 or 5 hours of solid fishing that you don't have to worry too much about fast, crazy current. And that's how it works in that inlet.
That's a good way to do it. I think it's going to work that way in a lot of inlets too. Now, when you're out there, you mentioned some weights. So you're using rigs or you're using jigs. What type of rod are you bringing when you're fishing from land?
Well, if I'm casting out, there's 2 lengths of rods that I use. I use a 10-footer if I'm casting out, because I like to have my rod tip over the water as far as possible to decrease the angle of the line going in. I want to be up as straight up and down as I can, even when I'm out. When I'm shorter, right at the rocks, I just bring my 7-foot boat rod with me. But it has to be a good heavy action, or the 10-foot rod that I use is a heavy action rod, and then the boat rod that I use, the 7-foot, I use a 7-foot G Loomis Pro Blue fast action. It has to have a good backbone on it, but a sensitive tip, because boom, 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 boom. You want to feel what's going on down there. Every little tap, every little bite. but you don't want a soft rod because you need to, when you have a fish on, you got to pull that thing up out of the rocks and start reeling as fast as you can. Because those fish are, you all know if you're fishing for tog, wherever you are, out on boats and stuff, when you got a tog on, that suckers, they swim hard, even 2-3 pounders. That rod goes over and you're feeling it. And when you're over by the jetties, they like to scooch under them rocks. And when they scooch under their rocks, good luck, you're done. So yeah, you need a heavy backbone on a rod, but a soft tip and a good strong reel that has a good gear ratio that as each turn really pulls in a lot of line. That's important to get the fish up out of the rocks and into you so you can land them. It's also very important when you need to lift your rig up and bring it in so you can rebait it. You don't want that thing to keep banging on the rocks and having a chance to get stuck. So the deal is, I always say, lift high, reel fast, instantly. Every time you go to move your rig, whether or not you have a fish on it. A lot of guys, I lose so many rigs. That's because they feel a bite. I don't have the fish. I'll let it back down. That's it. You're done. You let it back down. You're going to get snagged. Every time you go to lift that rig off the bottom, lift up high and reel in fast, regardless. Right. Or you're going to lose rigs like crazy.
Yeah. So, and just to clarify for participation trophy fishing, Dave is talking about heavy, maybe medium heavy to heavy power rods with fast action, not moderate action. So fast action, so that you have quicker transfer to the power of the rod, more of the bend is in the tip. And that's a great point that you bring up, though, about, when you're pulling that in, and I do this a lot because I'm used to retrieving and, at a moderate pace because I'm usually using artificials for other species. But for tog, and when you're near those jetties, get it up, get it off the bottom, and just reel as fast as you can because you're not getting a bite on the way in. There's no way. The only thing that will
get it up over them rocks and out of there so you don't get snagged. I mean, when you're out on a boat fishing straight up and down, that's not such a problem. Right. You're always at an angle on those jetties, and you're just prone to get snags. Right.
And the 7 foot, you said medium heavy to heavy rod is what you're using in tight. And what kind of reel what class reel are you using, and what type of braid are you putting on there?
I like a spinning reel. I love my Penn Battle 3. I on my boat rod, the G Loomis. That's like a 6-7-year-old rod that I have a Battle 2 on, which is almost just as old. It's a 5000 series. My Trophy 2, the 10-footer that I use, I just replaced the reel, and it's a Battle 3 DX 5000. And I'll put on a 60-pound test on those reels, generally because you have to have, when you're using braided line by rocks, they get nicked and they'll break real easy. So you have to protect your line by putting on a good length of mono leader on. Now, when I'm out by the jetty, I put on about 12 to 15 feet of 60-pound test mono on there. I tie it on with an Alberto knot. You can use the double uni. Double uni's a little thick, but you're not casting for distance. You're just dropping down or maybe just tossing out. So don't worry about those knots clicking in and out. That's slowing you down. As long as you got a good strong knot. I just love the Alberto knot. That knot has been so good to me over the years, and it's slimmer than the uni to uni knot, because the uni to uni knot, you're doing a lot of tying with the mono. It's a thick piece of line. It's a 60-pound test. Now the Alberto, you're just folding it over, and then you're wrapping with the braid, so it's not as thick. And I just like that. That's my favorite knot, and it's never failed for me. But yeah, you have to put on a good length of mono filament line, because you're just banging on all those rocks, scraping on all those rocks, and you start getting nicks in your braid, and you get a 4 or 5 pounder on even a 6 pounder. We don't get many 10s out there, but you get a good strong fish out there, it's going to snap your line, man, and you got to protect it by putting on some good length of leader for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm personally using an FG knot for most of it. Ed,
FG, yeah, if you can tie the FG, that's the strongest, thinnest knot for sure. Yeah,
it's not. So yeah, I think it is. Look, it depends on who you look to, but I think it is generally accepted as the strongest and slimmest. But at the same time, it's not that far ahead as the strongest of the uni to uni and the Albright. I don't think it's a significant difference. And I think the big thing to keep in mind is that 60-pound mono is not necessarily for the fish. That's for the rocks. You know,
100%.
It's because once they get you and they're down in those boulders, you're going to be wrapped around rocks. You're going to be around everything. So you want enough clearance between that rig and that braid so that, you know, the braid isn't getting raked across, because as soon as that braid hits a sharp rock, you're done.
Yeah. And the only reason why I put the 60-pound braid on is because if you get snagged down there, if you only have 20 or 30-pound test on your reel and you got 60-pound test mono leader coming out, what's going to break? It's going to break the braid, and you're going to lose all that leader.
Right. So
I always make sure I match up the braid to my leader. So now I know they're both strong, and then I use 30-pound test for my rig, so that's going to snap off, and I'll still have all my leader. That's the main reason why you put the heavy braid on your reel, because of that leader. You don't want to snap it off.
Right. There's nothing better than snapping it off and reeling it up and seeing you still have 90% of your leader left.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I think. You know, I like when I'm using a jig and it breaks on the jig. That to me means everything was planned perfectly. Besides the hook set and landing of the fish.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So we got a question in here that I want to make sure we bring up. And Dave, I don't know if you have the answer to this. I have an answer if you don't. But the question here is from MJ Fishnut. What is the best water temperature for tog? What are you typically looking for when you start fishing for tog?
That's good, because, you know, I would say no lower than 50. You can go into the 50s. I see tog out there in the 50s, even in the high 40s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think they like the real warm water. I think in the 60s and 50s is when we really start seeing them come into the inlets. Now, out in the deep, out in the ocean, and after a certain depth, apparently the water temperature is generally the same, 60, 80, 100 feet. I guess it's in the 50s down there, upper 50s. And I'm not sure. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can just tell you what I've learned, been told, and what I've experienced. I can say that when we're talking inshore, which we're definitely talking about when we're talking about fishing from land, right? I want to start when it hits the upper to mid 60s. And that's where I'm going to start fishing. And you know, we also have the benefit / curse in New Jersey that most people won't fish for them until it opens up to 4 fish limit, and then they start fishing for them. And by that time, it's typically mid 60s to low 60s, but down to 50. I found that once the water temperatures get to about 50, down to 48, 47, they're typically moving offshore, and you're not going to have that consistent bite from land. It's just not going to happen unless you can get some really, really deep water with structure right there. You might find some holdovers. They might hang out there. You know, some of these inlets and some of these back areas near inlets can get down to 60 to 80 feet, and you might find them there. But after that point, it's all offshore. That's when you're heading out front and you're going, I should say, not necessarily offshore, some near shore, but you're looking for the deeper waters. So
yeah.
I'm going to say, for me personally, I'm going to say something around 47, 48 degrees for the inshore land bite, up to, let's say I would maybe start just under 70 degrees. So 68, 69 degrees.
Yeah, I didn't think that warm, but I don't know. I haven't really studied that. I just know time of the year. I start going out there in September, and that's when I see it's in the mid 60s. And then it starts dropping down as the months tick by into the 50s, and I'm just catching pretty steadily up until it gets down into, like you said, the upper 40s, and then it's like, all right, let's go for schoolies at the beach.
Yeah, what I find is I really test the upper water temperatures in the spring. So in the spring, they start moving out once you start hitting around 70 degrees. At that point, it's usually the expanded season or the expanded limits are over at that point, and it's just a bycatch. But you tend to see a huge drop off once you get to those upper 60 degrees to lower 70 degrees in the bycatch of tog. So if you're going for sheep's head, you're not going to get a lot of tog after that point. You'll still get them. They'll still be there all year, but they're not nearly as active, and they're going to be a lot smaller. They're typically the nuisance. They become like the equivalent of the pinfish down south. They just can't get away from them.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's my answer. We have in here crabbing and fishing is saying 48 degrees to 59 degrees. And I'll tell you what,
right.
Ben's been on some nice fish this year. He's doing a good job. I've been watching some of his pictures and considering jumping out on his boat and sneaking aboard to get on some of that action. All right, so let's talk about this next question that we have, and it goes right into the next thing. So we talked about the rods, we talked about the reels, the line, the leader, but Ed, you're going to want to say something about this, but Dave, I want to hear yours. Now, Fishing Adventure uses both rigs and jigs. What are you doing? Are you using both rigs and jigs, or one or the other?
Me, I'm mostly using rigs, only because I can change out my sinker weights, and that's generally the reason why I do that. In the lower currents, or if I'm fishing close in between rocks, I like to drop down a jig. It's just easier to use. I'm not dealing with the length of line of the rig with the sinker and then the hook, and I just in the pockets and stuff between, I like to drop down jigs and stuff like that. But if I'm casting out, or if I'm dropping out into the inlet, I just use rigs.
Makes sense. Ed,
I'm a jig guy. I know
you're a jig guy. You make the jigs, but
no. I mean, I fish jigs. That's just the way I prefer to do it. I've perfected it to the point where I know, when they're biting. I've used the rigs. I've never had luck. I mean, I've caught fish, but not steadily and not the caliber of fish I wanted to catch. Even this past week, I went out on a boat, and the rig or the jig outfished the rig like 10-1.
Right.
So.
That's interesting. I can understand that, because you have that jig sitting there with the hooks sitting straight up, and you got a fish on that, and you pull up, you're gonna grab that fish.
Yeah, it's just set in the right position the whole time. Yeah. It can be difficult, though. I mean, there are times where and Dave, I can see why you would use the rigs. Now, Ed, you're typically fishing from a kayak, or you're fishing from a boat. And rig, Dave, I know you do too, but let's pretend you never do. Let's pretend you don't get on boats. So since we're talking about land right now, when you're fishing from a jetty and an inlet, you do have that extra issue of that current really sweeping through there, and nothing kills your day tog fishing, or even sheep's head fishing. Whenever you're fishing in the rocks, like we are for tog, like a current and a sinker or a jig that doesn't hold bottom well enough, because it tends to just sweep under the boulders and then out the other side, and then you get stuck no matter what. So I can see why you would be using the heavier weights, especially when you're saying, you're casting out 15, 20 yards. You're in that current and you're getting a little bit of a sweep there. But if you can throw on 5, 8, 10 ounces on that, and then you have a shot at holding the bottom, it does make sense. It definitely makes sense. It's not my style. I don't really have rods.
It's only because I mostly, I'd say probably, 3/4 of the time that I'm out there, I'm casting out. So, I always, I just find it just more versatile to use a rig where I can, switch up my sinker weights.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the rigs real quick. So what type of a rig are you using, and what type of sinkers are you putting on that rig?
The rig that I use, I call it a breakaway. I kind of learned this from being out on some of the head boats and stuff like that. And I have a setup right here. I got my rod, and I got my 12 feet of leader, 60-pound test. And this is how I set up my leader. This is the end of the leader. I'll tie a surgeon loop on the end, and I'll tie a dropper loop as close to that surgeon loop as I can, just up above it. And then I make up a whole bunch of these rigs here.
Is that 20-pound mono?
This is 30-pound test. I used to use a lighter test.
Yeah.
This is what I hold my sinkers with. I used to use a lighter test, and I was losing a lot of sinkers.
Okay.
There are areas out there where you're not necessarily snagged up by a rock. It could be a piece of rope. It could be a piece of fishing line or whatever. And I like that little extra bit of strength that I can actually, I can get the sinker out, So I use a 30-pound test. Obviously, you see I have a little loop on this one end, and I have the big loop on the other end. And I attach that to the very bottom loop here. Easy to switch out if you break it off. It's 30-pound test. It's strong enough to get that sinker out, but it's still weaker than my 60-pound test here. Yeah. So if I am stuck and I can't get it out, I just give it a pull. You know how to do that the proper way. Bang, that snaps off, and I keep a whole bunch of them with me. I like these little sandwich bags. You get these little Ziploc. I'm sorry, this is a snack bag. The sandwich bags are big. This is the snack bag. They're short. They hold all my leaders. I make about 10 or 12 of them, and I put them in my pocket. I don't have to keep going back to my tackle box or my bag or whatever I have out in there on the jetty. I have these in my pocket at all times. I snap off a sinker. I have a couple sinkers in my pocket. In this pocket, I have this bag of these little leaders that I make, and I can switch them out and be back in the water in a minute. Now the hooks I hang off of here. It all depends on what bait I'm using. If I'm using sand fleas, and everybody knows me, I'm sand flea Dave. Yeah. I rake up sand fleas, and that's my favorite bait, man. It's either that or the Asian crabs. But yeah, so let me just open this little Ziploc here. I have these all made up, and I'm having a hard time opening up this Ziploc here. Bear with me, folks.
So what we've learned on this live stream is everybody has issues when they're on the live stream. Nobody has issues when they're on the water.
I open these suckers right up on the water. All right, so I buy these little 1x2 inch Ziploc bags. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them on any place on the internet. They're like $6 for 100 of them. So I slide them in here. I keep a whole stack of them on these 2x3 bags, and this is a whole stack of rigs. I got about 10 or 12 of them in here, and these stay in my pocket as well, that I can easily quickly change out. And I put them in the bag with the hook facing up, so they slide out of the bag easy without you jamming up your hook on the way out of the plastic.
Yeah.
So that's 30-pound test. I use I like these Virginia hooks. It's got a longer shaft, and it's easy to manipulate and hang on to when you're hooking your crab. People use the 3.0 or the 2.0 or the 3.0, even the 4.0 owner hooks or the octopus hooks. Yep. They have a shorter shaft on them. They work fantastic. I just like these Virginia hooks because it has a long shaft on them. You can just grab onto them and boom, hook up your bait. So now I have my sinker down here off the bottom loop, and now I have a dropper loop off of here. You see how I made one as small as I can. Just 2 turns on 2 turns to make the dropper loop. It's 60-pound test. 2 turns works great. Slip that little loop through and attach that. And there you go. You got your hook with your bait on it, and you have your sinker down here. And that's my rig. That's what I use off the jetties. I even use these off the boats. Like I said, same thing with this 30-pound test. This thing gets hung up. You can't get it out. Boom, it snaps off. I reach in my pocket. I got a dozen of them here. And I got in a minute's time, I changed out my hook, and I got my bait back in the water. That's the rig I like to use.
And also, you're using that for sand fleas, or you're using that for sand fleas and for Asian crabs?
Sand fleas, Asian crabs. You can. I know guys who use, and I've used it too. Those bags of those little frozen shrimps.
Yeah.
Tautog love that. Tautog love pieces of clam. You got some salted clam, some fresh clam cut into little 1-inch pieces. Put it on the hook there. That's what I like to use. Also, if I'm fishing with green crabs, I like the snafu rig, which has the 2 hooks. I'm not going to attach it all. I'm just going to show you the rigs.
Right.
You can all figure out now how I attach things. Let's see if I can open this bag.
Well, as it was mentioned, you have stage fright.
Oh, you're all looking at me. So I make a snafu rig with the same deal, 30-pound test. But what I'll do is I'll take a length of 30-pound test and I'll snell a hook on either end, and then I'll make a little loop right in the center of it. And that's what I attach to that dropper loop is the end here. And I got my snafu. And you all know about snafu rigs. You got two hooks. You got a piece of crab you on one end, on the other end. Now you got two hooks on there, and that's my snafu rig. That's how I make mine. Other snafu rigs have the snelled hook with the slider hook. I just have a hard time just dealing with that sometimes. So I like the two that are dangling. They're just easier to use. So that's also what I'll bring with me if I'm fishing with green crabs or even white leggers. And if I want to use jigs, I do the same thing. Here's my jig, and I tie a length of leader on there, 30-pound test with a larger loop that I can pass the jig through once I attach it to the bottom surgeon loop on the same leader, and just leave the dropper loop hang up, and I got my jig on the bottom. And if anything happens where I'm going to lose my jig, boom, it snaps right off. I still got my rig with the two loops on it, waiting for me to reattach whatever hooks or jigs I have, and I'm moving right along.
That's a great setup to have. Yeah. Absolutely great. Ed, did you have a question?
I had something I wanted to add to this.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you are afraid to lose tackle, tog fishing is not the endeavor for you.
Yeah.
You are going to lose stuff.
But like I said, the thing you have that I was taught, and that I always remember: lift high real fast. Don't be like, oh, I'm not getting a bite. Let me just move it around a little bit. Oh, don't move it around. Leave it sit. If you're going to move it around, lift it and just reel it in, because you're going to get snagged, man. Right. Bring enough bait that you're always changing, and I bring 100 sand fleas with me. 3 dozen green crabs. Bring a ton of bait with you. You're going to be changing it out, and bring a ton of. I mean, I bring a good bunch of sinkers with me. I got 2s, I got 3s, I got 4s, I got 6s. They're all in this little pack here in my shoulder bag.
Actually, those play into the question I had. MJ wants to know any particular type of sinker. He said he's seen use spark plugs to small balloons filled with sand.
Yeah, I guess if you're losing a lot of sinkers, and you're snapping them off, I guess it's cheaper to do it that way. I mean, I buy mine in bulk. You find guys on eBay. There's a couple guys out there that sell them pretty cheap, and I just buy them like 50 at a time, 25 at a time. And but I use bank sinkers, basically bank sinkers. I don't use the pyramids. Some guys like to use these trolling sinkers. They're slimmer, but this is a 4-ounce. Now here's a 4-ounce bank sinker. How much thinner is it really?
Right.
So, and these are cheaper, and that's what I use, the bank sinkers. I guess there's other types, the round balls and all that stuff. I guess the slimmer the better. But when you get to fishing the same jetty all the time, you get to know the holes, you get to know where the snags are, and like I said, don't move that thing around, man. If you find a good spot where you're dropping down, and when you pick up, it's not catching on anything. It doesn't matter what sinker you have, because you've already learned to keep it clear of the rocks. So just basically bank sinkers, man.
Yeah, from rocks, I would agree with that. Some people use the flat bank sinkers, but that's more of a vertical jigging thing, in my opinion, because those things will get. I mean, they're so wide. When you start pulling them in, it's good in the current. Yeah. But once you start bringing them in, you're going to have some problems. I want to bring up real quick, before we go too far into this, question from James, who's from Texas. Our Tautog northern fish. What about South Texas? James, you are not going to find them in South Texas. They're generally a Georgia to the tip of the United, actually up to Canada, fish. So you're not going to find them there. You'll find them a short way into the lower Chesapeake, and all the way down to Georgia. But if you're further south than that, no. But let me just give you an idea of the type of fishing that we're talking about, which should be very familiar to you, especially right now because you should be targeting this fish right now in Texas, sheep's head. So a lot of similar types of tactics with tog as with sheep's head when you're talking about from land. The difference is the tog are almost, not always, but are almost always going to be on the bottom, whereas the sheep's head, depending on what type of structure you're fishing, may be up top. So you work the entire column often for sheep's head. The tog are typically going to be down on the bottom. They both give massive fights, but different fights. The tog will dig for the rocks, and they will get stuck in the rocks. They will stick themselves in there and wedge themselves in, so you can't get them out. But you won't find a tog down in South Texas. But you're welcome to come up and visit us in the Mid-Atlantic, and we'll go out fishing with you, and we'll show you what these incredibly ugly but incredibly delicious fish are like when you're out there targeting them in the winter, especially. So come on up here and get frozen with us.
I tell you, once you become an avid tog fisherman, those fish they're not ugly anymore. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I think when we had Frank Mahalik on, and I think I said those beautiful ugly fish, those ugly fish that are so beautiful to us that fish for them. I mean, it's the face that only a tog fisherman could love.
Yep, that big white chin. Now, you mentioned about how if you get a tog that runs under the rocks and jams you in there, that happens every now and then. And the trick is release your line. Don't keep trying to pull them out. I gotta get him. I gotta hold it tight. Just release your line, and eventually the fish is gonna not feel that it's on it. Anything is on it. And it doesn't feel like there's any pressure anymore. So it doesn't want to stay in that rock. That's only to protect itself. Release that line and then wait it out. I waited a fish out for 40 minutes once because I knew he was big. And he was close to 5 pounds. 40 minutes. He came out multiple times and there he is, and I'll pull him. Oh, he's in again. I waited him out 40 minutes and I got him up. That's what you have to do to him. Release that line, release that pressure. Let the fish swim back out so that you can tighten that thing up and let it swim a little bit to get away from that rock, and then pull it and tighten it. Pull up hard and reel in fast. Get it over the top of them rocks. You got to wait them out. You're not going to pull them out. It's not going to happen.
They go in head first and they extend their fins, and it's like they're locked. You can't get them out. Even with 60-pound test, you're not going to be able to pull them out. I don't know. I just envision under the water that they're just getting pulled apart, but they're not going to give up. Yeah. It's like a pit bull with something in its mouth. You cannot open those jaws once they're closed. You cannot get those fins to release until these fish decide.
And it's under a rock on the other side of the rock. So you're pulling against that rock to try to get that fish out. You're not pulling the fish out from under a rock this way. It's got to be pulled out. That's why you have to let it swim out so you can pull it in,
That's why we have so many tog come up with half a tail.
Oh,
they lock themselves in.
Yeah.
That happens quite often. Yeah, it's one of the most beat up fish when you pull them up, but they survive.
I tell you, those things survive, man. I'll be out on the jetty, when there's only one fish maximum, only one keeper allowed, and I'll get like a nice 16-incher, and I'll put him on a stringer and lower him down into the water between the rocks. And hook the stringer onto something that, either my bag or piece of structure that's there. And, I don't know if it's legal, but I'll trade up, a little while later, I'll catch like an 18 or a 19. I'll be like, well, I'll slip him off the stringer and slip him on the stringer. Do you know if that's legal or not? I don't know if
I honestly don't know the rules for culling because I don't do it. So I never looked. It's an interesting question on how you do it. I think it depends on, it might also depend on how you put it on the stringer. Are you putting it through the gill or are you putting it through the mouth? I'm not really sure. It's a good question. Something I'll look into.
Well, I've looked carefully, open up the gill and everything of the fish. And there's a decent hole down towards the bottom of where the gills are that you can slip that stringer through, that it's not damaging those gills.
Right.
It's right down near the bottom part, but don't do it in between all the gills. Do it against the body alongside the gills, and you don't get any blood. It doesn't hurt the fish at all. It's just grabbing by its chin like this.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful to do it that way if you're going to chance doing something like that. And, just talking about the versatility and the survivability of these fish, I mean, I've seen them stay out of water for an hour and they're still kicking around. I don't know if they'll live if you throw them back in the water after being out, but those things, they last a long time, and, you always want to bleed your fish and all that stuff. And I don't like to do it out on the jetty. I'll keep the thing alive in the water. And when I'm done fishing, I carry it off, and it takes me 20, 25 minutes sometimes to get to my truck. And I have a cooler of ice in there, and I'll pull it off the stringer, throw it in the cooler, and the thing will still be flipping around, cut its gills, and it'll bleed right out because the heart's still beating. After a 25-minute walk out of the water, those things are hardy fish.
Yeah. Here's an interesting comment. Let me get that up here for you to see. From Crabbing and Fishing. Every time he's put Tog in the Calcutta cooler bag with water, they've been alive when he's gotten home hours later.
Oh, yeah.
No aerator.
Yeah, without an aerator. Yep.
Yeah, and Ben's keeping them too. So he I guess he wasn't trying to keep them alive. They just decided they were going to stay alive. That's the best way to have fresh fish. A lot of people are like, bleed it right away. I'm like, well,
not if you can keep it alive.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, there's some of them, you can get some toxins or some chemicals in them if they're really panicked and going crazy, I guess. I like to keep them on a stringer.
They say poke the brain, and that stops that from happening. I've never tried that. Where you kill them, and it stops those toxins. But I don't know. I've never done that. Maybe someone out there can explain that a little bit more. But I've heard that that's a good thing to do for all fish, to stop those toxins from flowing around.
I'll tell you what, Dave, you're bringing up a lot of research that now I have to do to figure out the best way to kill these fish. Keeping them alive, that's the way I used to do it. But I now have this habit of sharks coming after my stringers in the kayak. So I've gone to just immediately dispatch them humanely and bleed them and get them into the cooler. Ed doesn't like to bring coolers. Because he thinks it jinxes him, but
it does.
Okay.
I can tell you, I will bring ice just because I put my drinks on ice, and I'm one of those guys that I throw in the fish even with blood on them right into my own drink cooler.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care.
Of course.
So I often end up.
That's organic. Blood is organic.
That's the way I look at it, and I often end up bringing other people's fish around with me, or John Creeley, who's a co-host on here from time to time. I've toted around his bloody fish in my drink bag several times. Yeah,
I bleed everything out on the beach, but for some reason, I like to keep my Tog alive, and then I bleed it out in the cooler on my way home.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, they're tasty fish, whether they're bled or not. We're out a few weeks ago, brought home some Tog, and my wife immediately said, "New favorite fish."
Yeah.
And she's like, anytime you want to go Tog fishing, just go and bring one home.
Yeah,
I don't have to bring the limit home, but bring one home so that we don't freeze our fish. So, we get a meal that week. So I've been given the instructions to get out there, and Dave, maybe I can get out there on the rocks with you because the weather still is not cooperating. It is not kayak weather. It's not small boat weather.
Yeah, come on up. I haven't been out on the rocks in about a week or two. But I hear they're still pulling them in out there. And the last couple of times I went out on the boat, we stopped at the North Jetty by the monument out there. That sunken jetty that runs out from the Yala Beach State Park side, and we were pulling in 5-6 pounders. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's the jetty that people like to run over with their boats at night.
Yeah,
yeah,
dumbass.
Yeah, but they really need to mark it better too.
As I say,
well, actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that. It is marked. It's people don't understand what the mark means.
Yeah, it is. That's what I was going to say. It is marked, and if you know the area, that's there.
Yeah.
And you get the guys who've been down here their whole lives. They know when you have high water, high tide, just no problem, just buzz right over it.
Yeah.
But that's not that's not a good look for other people going, oh, you can go over that.
No. No, and it's a serious thing when the charter boats go out, and even when they have the clearance, they don't go over that.
No,
they always go out and they make the hard turns. And when in doubt, look at the professionals and model your own behavior after the professionals. I've seen
100%.
People on rocks way too many times. It's like, well, I saw this other boat do it. Yeah, yesterday at high tide, but today it's low tide, and you can literally see the rocks. So I don't know why you went that way.
And sometimes you got some good swells that'll just drop you right on top of them rocks, even if it is high tide. So come on, guys, be safe.
Yeah. Expensive.
And if you're going out on the jetties, please wear spikes on your feet. Please wear corkers. I don't care if it's a bright, sunny, dry day. You can slip on those rocks very easily. There's moss all over them. Even if it doesn't look like it's green moss, there's all different shades of moss. It might not even be very thick, but it's not rock. It's organic, and you can slip on them.
Yeah.
Please invest in a good pair. Corkers is just a brand name. I just say spikes, but everybody just says put your corkers on. You got to put them on, man. You're actually stupid if you don't. So
I agree. I mean, I've taken a header on a jetty while wearing corkers. I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't had them on. So just be really careful.
Well, also, if you're out there and you got swells coming up over them rocks, that water doesn't care if you're wearing corkers. They'll take your feet right out from under you.
Yeah.
And I've seen guys out there, I have corkers. Boom. They come back bloody with their rod broken and everything. Well, I had corkers on. Yeah, well, you had just a couple feet of water, almost up to your knees, maybe up to your shins. Just shoot across and take your feet right out from under you.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah. Yep. And we've all
done it. We've all been there when we shouldn't have. But I've learned. And
because I got to catch that fish. No fish is worth it. I was out there tog fishing last year, and I had my my other rod with me, waiting for false albacore to come, and sure as hell they were out there past the tip, and you couldn't. I was 30 yards from the tip of the rocks, and the albies were going crazy out there, and there was no way to get out to the tip of the rocks. And there was one guy who tried it. He got halfway out there, about 10 yards to the end, and he got knocked down real hard. Yeah. And no fish is worth it, man.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll just bring up, safety. We always talk about safety on I mean, almost every episode we have something with safety. Just keep in mind also, you may want to do it, but you are going to put other people at risk, because when you go and you get blasted by that wave and now you're off the jetty, the other people are going to want to help you. There's almost always, we're talking fishermen here, who kind of live by this unspoken, unwritten code that you look out for each other for the most part. Oh, yeah. And they're going to be climbing down on those rocks, trying to help you if they can. They're going to be trying to keep you in sight, even if it means now they're getting hit by water. So just keep it in mind. Be responsible. Yes, it's not worth going out there for that fish. And always remember, this is what I tell people. And I think I said this to you, Ed, when I was trying to get you to get a dry suit. Just think of who's going to be the one that has to identify your body afterwards and how they're going to feel because you didn't buy that, or you didn't.
I don't think you've ever said that to me.
It might. It was to one. Maybe it was to John. It was to somebody. I said, "Look, somebody's going to have to identify your body, and just think of how you're going to make them feel after that. After having your bloated body come out of the water."
Yeah, no, you didn't say that to me.
Okay.
I don't fish in waters that I need a dry suit. So
okay. Maybe it was John. So anyway, that's a little bit of preaching from mine, and I'll stop there. But Dave, this is the fastest hour ever. We're up at about an hour. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to get in there before we close this episode up?
I guess just baits. We didn't really get so into baits. Like I said, I rake up sand fleas off the beach. Sand fleas, as the season starts winding down, and I know sand fleas are going to start to disappear. I like to rake them up like crazy and bring home buckets of them, and I freeze them. People say, "Oh, you have to parboil them." You don't have to parboil them. I've never parboiled them. What I do is I put them in 1 gallon Ziploc bags, enough that when you lay it on the table and they spread out thin, they're not stacked on each other. Seal up that bag and just throw it in the freezer. I have like 7 or 8 bags in my freezer right now that are stacked up. The sand fleas were alive when I froze them, and I've used frozen sand fleas like that 6 months later. Like I said, I had them in there since October, and here it is April. We got the 1 month. Pull them out of the freezer, pop them on the hook. I'm getting bites like crazy on them things because the fluid that's in there, they're frozen, and then when they thaw out, that fluid's still there. It's not cooked away by the parboiling, and they catch just as good, man. So yeah, you can freeze sand fleas without parboiling them, and I heard that when you parboil sand fleas, they get really smelly. You got to do it outside or something. Also around inlets, the jetties, the loose rocks that are in by the sand where the water comes up, that's a great spot for the Asian crabs.
Yeah.
You know, you can go between the rocks. The guys like to take like stockings or socks or something and put meat and whatever in there and stick them between the rocks, and that's a great way to get the Asian crabs up as well. But yeah, along the Barnegat Inlet jetty there, on the inside where all the sand is, when you have some water coming up, just turn over them rocks, man, and gather up those Asian crabs. That's like lights out when you got those baits, those Asian crabs, for sure. And even down by the south end of the island, where the sod banks are in Holgate, it takes a while to get there, and you have to go there at the right time and at night. We have all those fiddler crabs that come out at night, and you get to scoop up buckets of those things too. And like I said, clam, those bags of frozen shrimp that you get at the supermarket. I know guys, that's all they use is those frozen shrimp.
Right.
So yeah, and I've heard pieces of used gulp. I've never tried it, but you know, I'm not going to go out to the inlet jetty with a bag full of frozen gulp as my only bait. But I might try it.
I wouldn't either.
Not frozen. I mean leftover pieces.
Yeah.
I heard that's good for triggers and blowfish.
Oh, okay. I've heard about blowfish too. You're right. I got some good triggers off that jetty. I got some sheep's head off that jetty fishing for tog. Yeah, triggers are awesome, man.
We got to do an episode on triggerfish. Which, by the way, 2 weeks ago, out on the water, we were out on the fishmonger for the day.
Yep.
Dude pulls up a trigger.
Nice.
Yeah, that was the surprise catch of the day, a triggerfish. It was amazing.
3 or 4 pounds.
Yeah, it wasn't big.
Okay.
It was a smaller one, but man, it was not expected. We're catching these huge striped bass, tons of them, hundreds of them.
Wow.
We're catching plenty of tog. Yeah, and up comes a trigger. It was
awesome. Yeah. We get that every once in a while out the jetty there, where all of a sudden you're getting trigger, and it's like, yeah, baby, it's fun.
Oh yeah, that's
good eating too.
Fun time.
That's a good eating fish. I wouldn't say my top best fish, but it certainly is good eating fish.
I just don't like cleaning them, but we'll do an episode on triggerfish.
Yeah, they're rough. Yeah,
they're a little bit more complicated. It's not normal. Yeah. It's not a normal fish to.
Yeah, they have to peel that last part off. It's like,
yeah, no fun.
Yeah.
Ed, anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I do. Before we close out, KB is asking why I do not bring a cooler. It's bad luck. Anytime I've ever brought a cooler with ice and stuff, I've never caught anything to bring home. Even the last time when we went fishing with Billy, remember, Rich? He was setting up his cooler. I'm like, "You're not bringing that, are you?" He's like, "Yeah, why not? I got to put something to put my fish in." I said, "You're not gonna catch anything worth keeping." And I don't think he even caught a fish that day.
Yeah, there's unexplainable things out there.
It's like the banana on the boat. You know, it's one of those superstitious things. I don't bring a cooler.
The one buddy I go out on his boat all the time, Carl Chen. Hey, Carl, he hires a captain to run his boat, and do not call for the net. Don't even mention the net. Don't pull the net out of its hold until it's ready.
Yeah,
that you have a fish coming up. Don't call for the net. For some reason, that's like a jinx to him.
I've heard people do that. The banana is definitely a common one.
Yeah,
actually,
and don't say, "Boy, we're catching fish today. Boy, it's a good bite." Oh my God, you just ruined it.
No, you don't mention that you don't go in with an attitude like you're going to catch all the fish.
No,
because
I tend to not be superstitious when it comes to fishing. I'm superstitious with everything else sports related. But okay. I'm definitely not so much with fishing. I'll bring ice, and I'll still catch. I think, Ed, it's because you believe you won't catch, and it transfers into your fishing. I do believe in the. So stupid. I do believe that bananas do jinx you. I do believe that.
See, I don't.
I was talking to Greg Kudnick, the owner of Fisherman's Headquarters, about that. He has a charter that he runs. And he had a guy out, and the guy says to him, "Here, you want a banana?" And he's like, "What are you, out of your mind? Get that thing off the boat." He goes, "Well, you didn't see on the way out, I ate a banana." He says, "This guy was one of my best fish. You know, he caught the most fish out of all my charters. He not only brought multiple bananas on my boat, ate one of them, and he caught the most fish than anybody. He says, so I don't know what to tell you. He says, but I still don't allow bananas on my boat.
No, I'm pretty sure it's illegal in 27 states. I have to check that. It might be 28 states now, but that's just rude. You never do that. You never wear the black shoes on a boat, and you never use the spray suntan lotion on a boat. You never bring bananas.
Oh yeah, I always heard about the suntan lotion thing too.
That's a great way to break your neck
on the beach when you're plugging. You can't have suntan lotion on your hands because then it makes the plug smell and whatever.
You spray it on the boat. That is true. It gets on the floor of the boat and you slip and fall and break your neck.
Yeah, it also stains it. It stains.
Now there's another safety issue. No spraying sunblock on the boat. Just slip and fall on your ass.
Yep, definitely don't want to do it. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here, guys. I want everyone to know, if in the chat right now, the chat's going to end as soon as we log off. If you're watching the replay, you can put a comment below the video. We'll respond to that. But the best place, if you want to reach me or Ed or even Dave to talk about it, if you have any questions, is saltstrong.com. Go to the fishing tips section. It's there right now. How to catch tautog, blackfish tog from shore with Bayside Dave. There is a blog article there, and you can put comments in there. We're going to look at that, and we'll answer any questions that you may have, and especially for the podcast, because they're not even going to get this for another week or so. So that's where you want to go and check it out. So we'll be back next week, next Monday, the guest to be announced. So until next week, until next episode, everyone get out there. Get on the water and get some tight lines.
Bye, guys.
'Cause fishing,